Hey, I'm Steve Van Coor, and this is part of a video series for those of you who would like to know more about what it means to be a city manager or a county administrator. Today's session is about the practical aspects of being in that position. We have three excellent guests that have been on our podcast, if you've listened to the FCCMA podcast, and that's the reason we're having them back. I'd like to ask you each to quickly just introduce yourself, tell a little bit about the area you work in and the work you do.
I'm Joyce Shanahan.
Hey, Joyce.
I'm the city manager for Ormond Beach. We're about 43,000 people. We're in Volusia County. Our claim to fame is we have an oceanfront park on the Atlantic Ocean, and the Daytona 500 is run not in my community, but a neighboring community.
Right nearby, so you can hear it when it's going on.
I can hear it at my house.
Terry?
I'm Terry Atchley, Hardy County Manager. Just recently, in the last less than a year, I've been recently a city manager for 11 years in Hardy County, city of Wauchula. Our county as a whole, about 28,000. We're right in the center part of the state with a population of about 28,000 people, very rural area.
And I like the fact that you've done both, so we're going to touch on a little bit of some of the differences between what it means to be a county administrator and what it means to be a city manager. To you, Michael?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, man. Good to see you.
Michael Stavres, and I'm a city manager in Winter Haven, Florida. So we're a population of just over 56,000 people right in the middle of the state in Polk County, one of the fastest growing counties in the nation right now and has been for the past few years. And our claim to fame is, we are a very rural community, and we've grown and grown and grown.
Yeah, not anymore.
Not anymore. We're home of Legoland, Florida, and we are also the home of the chain of lakes, which is a unique natural asset that we have in Winter Haven.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Joyce, I'd like to start with you.
Okay.
Before, we see the meetings, we see them on TV, we read about it in the paper. What is the work that goes into those meetings beforehand from a city manager's point of view?
Well, from my perspective, the very most important thing is a strategic plan, because all of our agenda items are tied to the strategic plan. So you need to know where you want to go, and if you don't have a plan, you don't know how you're getting there or if you got there at all. So that's the premier item that we use, but generally...
You use that to guide you.
Yes, we do,
Yeah.
of all of our issues. But the mechanics of the agenda,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking a little bit about. We have a ongoing list of items that we use that fall into certain categories. We know certain things come up for renewal, contract renewals. We have bid documents. We have legislative issues. But the staff gets together once a week, and we review the agenda that we're working on at that time. We always have a to-do list from the prior commission meeting
Right.
to add those to the list. And
And those will be follow-ups. The commission said, we want to report on such and such,
or
and so you have
we
to...
want to look at redoing Casson Park. So that's not just a report, that's a big project. So we have workshops or meetings from that. But we meet with the city clerk, and every manager has their area of responsibility: finance, public works, leisure services. We go over those agenda items. Ours is actually automated. We use Civic Clerk right now. We're changing to Granicus. But I review every single agenda item and every word of the agenda item. I read every single one, and I am the last review in the process.
So let me ask you a question. That is assembled by each department head? They bring it to you, and you put it on the agenda and review all of that?
No, it's all electronic. It all goes through the city clerk's office, all the documentation, all the backup, and there's certain levels of review depending on what the item is, and that agenda management software helps with that.
Oh, interesting.
And then I am the final sign-off on all those items. So I'm like the go, no-go if we're doing a launch. If I don't like it, I send it back. If I don't like the wording, sometimes I'll rework the wording myself, or I will send
And
it.
you do that through the project management software?
Yep, or I will send it back. Sometimes I have repeat offenders, if you will, that don't write well. And so it's a lesson learned. If you keep getting an item returned from me, then you need to do some better work on that.
Okay, excellent. Terry, you were the city manager of a small city in Wauchula. You didn't have probably the benefit. Did you have that kind of software system?
We just got that software not too long
Okay,
ago.
because this
About
is
2
new
years,
information to me. So the process is similar. I mean, you still have each
not
department hands you
mechanical, right.
report. Yeah, you build it, you review it, and then in preparation, I want to talk a little bit more about the preparation. But you didn't have as many department heads.
No, we didn't have as many, Steve, but we had just as many agenda items.
Sure.
Not be as in-depth or as many as is across the board so many varieties, but we always end up with very large agendas. But we did have a small in-house version of a software program that we were able to use for our agenda software system, although it all went to the city clerk, as Joyce had mentioned. But one of the things I am liking about county government now is we have Granicus, and we are just now
So
in the
gorgeous.
stages of teaching all of our department heads and assistant managers how to utilize that format because just a typical agenda for us in Hardy County, in a small rural county, is 400 to 500 pages of an overall agenda with all the supporting and backup documentation that has to go.
And so what does that look like at the commission? Do they have iPads or laptops that they pull it up on so it's not dealing with big unwieldy books?
So when I first came to Ormond Beach, I was the first one to introduce an electronic agenda there on an iPad, and they weren't used to it. So what I did is I loaded and paid for it personally, not using city funds, Angry Birds on their iPad. So they would have, first of all, they get familiar with it, and they all loved it. So that was a great way to introduce it.
You introduce it. This goes to the heart, and we've talked about this on the podcast, the diversity of skill sets you have to have as a city manager, right? So here you went from a transition from paper documents and doing all that stuff to online. You probably had to evaluate different systems, understand how to program it. Very interesting. How about you? What do you do before the commission meetings?
Well, we're kind of the same boat. So we've been on Granicus for, I'm going to say, probably 6 or 7 years now. And we started off in the paper process just the same, and binders. that were
Yeah,
so
my gosh,
thick.
thousands of pages.
But strategic planning is a key piece to it. The bigger piece is organization skills. So like in these electronic software programs, I'm the last person that signs off on it, and I either say it goes or it doesn't go. But depending upon what the item is, if it's a purchase, it's got to go through our procurement staff, our finance department. If there's contracts, it's going through the attorney.
Legal department.
If there's a pathway for each type of item. So when they select an item, the staff, they start preparing their agenda items, and they're forwarding them through. I have a good sense of what's coming. You can
You read
forecast,
ahead, don't you?
you can forecast and see what's coming on, and it goes through that process. And you're talking about the being strong writers. I was taught many years ago by a city manager the need these are historical documents. I'm pulling documents from the 60s, 70s, 80s of fact sheets and agenda summaries to research current issues. And you want to go back and make sure you've got good information there. So
How was that easement drawn? Why was that easement drawn? Okay, yeah.
Is the agenda report clear and concise that you can get the information you need? So we really hark on that of making sure it's got all the accurate information and all the questions.
That's really interesting. I never thought of you're creating a historical record in real time.
So many times we have to ask ourselves the question, why did they do this? And there's just not enough data there to clearly understand why these decisions were made 20, 30, 40 years ago that are having impacts on this today.
And so you got to go back and research that.
And the nice thing with the platforms is the ability to get that information out to the public is also extremely easy, because they can get a link to that same agenda with all the same backup. They can see basically the same thing that the commissioners have on their iPads. And we've structured our entire.
Do you find a lot of people do that while you're having the meeting? They're following along the agenda at home. How cool is that?
Definitely.
I can't think of a more open government concept than following along with the agenda, 'cause it's not some mystery book that they're looking through, with Angry Birds printed on the page.
I'll tell you another interesting piece and something I would share with my colleagues here. We do a slide deck. So when we're doing presentations, it's one thing to have the fact sheet or what we call the agenda report in front of you, but it doesn't always have all the maps to it or be able to pull up additional information that the commissioners may want. So once that agenda is approved by me, then the staff work with my assistant to create the slide deck that's running throughout the entire meeting. And we do a YouTube presentation of our meetings, and that's what's on the screen during that meeting. When they're watching it live, they're seeing the slides that are being showcased within the meeting, and they can see, okay, here's where the property is, here's an actual map, maybe it's a Google Earth 3-dimensional view of it, so they can get bearings.
So if you're doing a rezoning, you could say, hey, it's in this urban growth area, it's outside the area, and what you're being asked to do is rezone it over here on the northwest side or something like that. Very cool.
The summary report, the agenda item, those are very technical documents, and that's that historical record. And as staff, we can understand that, but to the lay person that may be in the audience, they may not have that same understanding of it. So we simplify it down to here's what the item is, here's what the cost is, here's what the recommendation is, here's some visual aids to go along with it. So if you're just Joe Citizen sitting there, you can follow along.
Kind of like in a technical paper, the abstract and then the detailed stuff
And
going on.
we started the same thing about a year ago. We do a 3 to 5 slide deck per item, even if it's on a consent agenda item. So
Oh, interesting,
So
if you
that-
need to.
right, and so it helps focus my staff when they're talking to the commission, and it makes it much more understandable to the general public.
I want to follow up on the consent item, but you said something I want to follow up because I think it's important in understanding the role of a city manager. You said I'm the last one in line, but at some level you're the last and then you're the first, right? Because you're that. So staff, what I'm getting is staff assembles based on feedback from other meetings, other needs, other charges, other reports, statutory things they have to do. That funnels through your office, and then you in turn deliver that to the commission.
Right.
So you're both last and then first, and from their perspective. Expand upon how that works a little bit.
So, and my take is, and I was just having this conversation with my deputy city manager recently, we cannot be the subject matter expert on every single thing, even though we read every agenda item
Right.
and we know the backup. If we're doing a major utility issue, my engineers have to be the expert on that. I'm the conduit to get that to the commission and to be able to anticipate what their questions are going to be to make sure that we're prepared to answer it. But a lot of times they'll want to get down to the technical detail on it, and we try and answer those ahead of time.
What kind of sleeves are we doing to reline the
Right.
sewer pipes? You're like, talk to the engineer. Okay, that makes sense.
Never guess every question that's coming. You can be talking about a force main, and suddenly you're deep into a transportation project that has nothing to do with it. It can go anywhere.
Or and invariably somebody has a personal issue. My septic tank, blah, blah, when am I going to,
I
yeah.
remember way back when. Oh, by the way, how did we do that one? It can go all over the place. So, being the generalist to deliver the message, but having the subject matter expert on standby to answer the in-depth questions they may have. The biggest thing for us is asking the questions ahead of time of ourselves of are we prepared to answer it, and trying to understand what's Commissioner A or B or C, what's their take on this, or do they have any history with it? Do we need to do more education with it? Are they familiar with this? And that helps us really craft what we're putting together in that agenda. As far as the items, they just kind of flow what's the work at hand. There's certain things that we know, okay, we've got to do this every July. Budget stuff.
You're right.
Know when your
There's some things that are in cycle, right?
know when your readings are, all of those things. And there's certain things that happen throughout the year. The rest of the stuff that gets loaded in the agenda is what's the work at hand? What
Right.
are we dealing with right now? What contracts coming up for renewal? A lot of the stuff that deals with planning and growth management, we don't control that. That's controlled by the developers. The folks that are coming and say, hey, I want to get a new land use or a rezoning on this property, or we want to annex in. We take those as they come.
Well, part of that, though, for me, especially the land use items, because that's a little contentious. We're a small community. They want to stay small. And my commissioners and mayor are elected everybody every 2 years. So I have like an election.
Full turnover?
Yes, a full term.
Wow.
It could
They
be.
don't stagger them?
They do not stagger them. And so when we have like growth issues or new developments, I have to be careful how those pan out. And I've sometimes said to the planning director, look, we need to hold off on that for 2 weeks or another month, because they're just not ready for back to back to back to back, things like that. And we talk to the developer, we let them know what's going on. We say, hey, it's not in your best interest if we go now, especially if you're behind a 5,000 units, subdivision. So, but it's part of that too, is knowing what their ticking points
So you have
are.
to govern some of the flow of that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, because especially because you only have 18 hours to conduct a commission meeting till 4 o'clock in the morning. I want to get to your question, Terry, but you had said something earlier, and I want to expound upon, because presumably our audience is not that knowledgeable. You said even items on consent agenda. Explain what consent agenda is and how something becomes part of the consent agenda.
So not everybody has the same things on consent agendas. My commission, where I came from in the Panhandle, you couldn't put any purchase on the consent agenda.
No purchasing at all.
Now here, if it's within my purchasing authority, I have 25,000, I don't even have to put it on the agenda. I have put $1 million contract on the consent agenda, and they will approve it because we have provided all the backup. But these are typically routine items most of the time, routine purchases, like, you buy fuel every month or whatever.
But you need approval and authority from the commission,
Right.
so it's not, so it's on the consent agenda. Consent agenda is kind of like, I love the consent agenda. It's a way to get rid of a bunch of things quickly where you don't have to have debates and conversations, because the presumption is that we're all in agreement, we just have to go through the motion.
And anybody can pull an item from the consent agenda. Any of the
commissioner,
commissioners can pull an item. What we do is, the mayor has come up with a plan, is that if you don't really sure about it, but you don't want to pull it, he gives a comment period at the end of the consent agenda.
Okay.
So we approve 15 things. Does anybody have anything they want to comment on? So that becomes part of the record as well. The minutes are taken. Hey, I voted for XYZ. I really love the color blue. I wish you would paint that blue and not yellow.
You do agenda reviews?
Yes, I do.
See, that's what we use our
That's-
consent. So in a commission meeting, the consent, there's 20 items on there, and they're approved as one motion for all those items, unless an item's pulled. And we don't even discuss them during the meeting, but we do an agenda review
How we do.
the week prior with all of our commissions
Individually.
in session.
Oh, you
Call
do.
meeting.
We do it individually.
So we do, and we'll do those if we've got big items that we really need to drill down on. But we do a noticed agenda review. In fact, there's one this evening that I have a staff.
That's
person
an interesting concept.
in the review of the agenda, they don't get too deep in the details, but on the consent, we'll go through every individual item and explain
Isn't that like death by 1,000 cuts?
it. It saves a lot of time.
Interesting how there's different
yeah.
techniques of doing that,
And
yeah.
it gives the commissioners chance to discuss those items and get some further clarity, so that we're not just putting it back upon them. Did you read the agenda? Exactly.
Well, we do those individually, and because of the sunshine, you can't have 2
Well,
hours.
what that means for the uninitiated is, in Florida, we have broad and open sunshine record laws, but a part of that is 2 commissioners, 2 electeds on the same body cannot discuss an item that's on the agenda.
That will
They
come
can
before them, yes.
Right, they can discuss the sunrise, they can discuss the Super Bowl, they can discuss whatever they want, but if something is going to be coming before that body, they're not allowed to discuss it except, as you said, in a duly publicly noticed meeting. Terry, you got to jump.
That transition to after I went to the county, as they were doing individual agenda reviews, but doesn't necessarily mean that the information is always getting relayed exactly the same way when you kind of have 4 or 5 of them. So we've been blessed so far that it worked for us. Everything we do is we have 2 meetings a month now, but that first meeting it was like the workshop. Now the workshop can get a little lengthy because we'll discuss. Nothing gets on the next meeting's agenda unless it's been workshop.
Oh, really?
That way we make sure that the public had opportunity. They know what's coming at our next meeting. They know it'll be an opportunity for the commission to take action one way or the other. And then that also helps us dispose of a lot of those lighter things that, yes, this is just normal operational, to stack up our consent agenda to where then when we get to the meeting, we can move on real efficiently.
What's interesting about this is what I'm seeing is this funnel into the city commission meeting, all the work that has to go in, all the preparation, all the review, all the staff meetings, et cetera. It sometimes makes me wonder, well, when do you get to actually do your job?
You don't, because everything we've talked about this morning goes back to both Joyce and Michael Michael have already mentioned this about strategic planning. When I went to the city of Wauchula 12 years ago, they'd never heard of a strategic plan. Hardy County has never had a strategic plan. City of Wauchula now has one, and we've completed in the last couple of months the very first one in Hardy County, because now I have a basis, as they talked about, that everything we need to do needs to start lining up with what are our priorities. What are the initiatives that the commission have all collectively agreed? These outliers are going to come in there. You're going to have to deal with these individuals. But as an overall objective, we can know here's how we need to build our agenda to meet these goals, these needs as defined.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this on our podcast with you, which is, that's your big thing, which is have a strategic plan, know who you want to be, know where you want to go, and then does each week, each month fit into that plan? Otherwise, you're right, it's a death by 1,000. You end up doing all these other things, and oh, by the way, we got to get back to our strategic plan.
Well, and that's the other beauty of these platforms, these software platforms, is we code every agenda item for a strategic goal.
Oh, really?
Yes. So because I have to report out on that, so I need to know what the heck we did last
Give me
month.
an example.
So if it was like They wanted to rebuild Casson Park because they want to enhance their park network. So that would be a strategic plan for the improving our recreational services, and that would be categorized under that, and we put it that keyed on the agenda so that they know that.
So this is something to improve our recreational
Right.
services.
And
Okay.
so when they say, oh, we didn't do nothing this year, I can say, oh, look what you accomplished in your strategic plan. And we do a quarterly report to them and an annual report on their accomplishments of their strategic plan.
So I'm mindful, like back in the 80s and the 90s, Fort Lauderdale was known as a spring break destination. And what was happening each year when spring breaks happened, people would come down, they'd destroy hotels, they'd people fall off the balconies, all kinds of destruction. And their strategic plan was, we no longer want to be that. We want to be a different kind of community. So then each item, not every single item, obviously, was
Be
geared.
hiring more police officers, not allowing alcohol in the on the beach.
Curfews,
Right.
stuff like that, no more so many people to a room kind of stuff. These all fit under the umbrella of a strategic plan to make. And now if you think about it, almost nobody thinks of Fort Lauderdale as a spring break destination anymore, right? It's this large metropolitan area with all these thriving businesses, and so mission accomplished there. Let me shift gears. During the commission meeting itself, because it's really interesting, because at some level you're both the man behind the curtain and the man in front of the curtain. And I like what you said to Michael, which is you can't be an expert on everything, except when you go to a local cocktail party. Then you know everything about everything and you could be the expert. But
I think you do.
yeah, of course. And of course, we're not going to let them not think that. But when you're in the commission meeting, and let me do it in reverse order too, Michael, tell me a little bit about the role the city manager plays during the meeting,
So this
without using the words traffic cop.
this is interesting because I think this is something as a city manager I learned. It took me a little while to figure this out. It's not my meeting. It's not Terry's meeting. It's not Joyce's meeting. This is a meeting of the elected body of which you are a staff member of. And you have to be ever mindful of that. People will come to the podium to speak to the commission with pointed questions, and they may be looking directly at you. It's the commission's meeting, and you have to help guide that back to the commission that, I understand, Mr. Sisson,
I'm just the implementer.
you're speaking to me. This is their meeting regarding policy and the items that you're bringing up. It's for them to hear. They may ask me questions.
How do you handle that?
Well, you be very reserved. You have to be very intentional about that.
Even in a strong city manager form of government.
Yes. So what I try to do is meet with the commission, with the mayor, who's the chair of the meeting, prior to, and make sure that he's all set and we've got an understanding of that. People that come up and speak, they may be asking me a question, but they really need to be asking you that, and work with the commission to help redirect that back to them. They take ownership of that, because otherwise it can quickly become that you feel you're the person on trial. That's the prosecutor at the podium.
And they're the judge and jury.
They're the judge and jury. That shouldn't be the case.
Interesting.
And that was a hard one for me to learn, because the commission expects you to be that subject matter expert, be able to answer all the questions. And that's fine. I'll answer the questions that you share, you want me to answer, but it really needs to go through you.
That's an interesting observation, because there's got to be times when a question is asked of the commission and you know the answer, right? How long before that park is finished? Or why are we renovating that park? And because I'm the guy with, yeah, exactly, that's where I was
Blood
going.
running down my face or bite my tongue.
Exactly, but it's their, that's a really important point. And so that restraint to allow them to be in charge and to make those policy decisions.
And I think the other piece of that is that, not to interrupt, but it also sets the record straight and clears the perception of what the role of each is. And that you're not the person that's you're running the city as the manager.
Yeah.
You're implementing their policies, but they are the guiding five in my case. They are the people that are making the ultimate decisions on these items. And if you're quick to answer those questions and you're putting yourself ahead of the commission, you're kind of usurping their role and responsibility.
Yeah, once the city manager's name is well known, it's usually as a sign that you're about ready to leave, right? What's the name of a park or a building after you? You're like, okay, we'll see you later. What is your role now? And I'd like you to address this in two ways, how that role may have changed from when you were city manager of Wauchula and now that you're the county administrator of Hardy.
Well, for me personally, one of the initiatives that I've always tried to utilize as a leader, even when I was in the private sector building teams and leading companies to the public sector, is I relate everything to a team mentality. And yet whether you can be a football team, a baseball team, whatever kind of sport you want to be involved in to help my team understand what it is we're trying to do. We work for the folks that's up in the big office, the 5 of them in typical cases. There are those 5 commissioners, whether you're at the city commission or a county commission. But everyone has to understand they have a very important role to play. The managers, whether city or county, are always deemed as the person in charge because we are. We are the CEOs, and we're ultimately responsible for any and all actions that take place under our watch. However, the rest of the team has to understand and know how important their roles are, whether they're whether they're an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator with special team. They got to know that they're going to help make sure these things move forward. So from a city to a county transition perspective, it's not really much different other than at the county level. There's different levels of approval processes that we have to go through. At the city, I was a little more liberal to be able to, I could apply for a $1 million grant and not worry about it. The only thing I had to do is get it to the commission to approve to accept it if it was awarded. But I can't even chase grant dollars unless my commission has signed off on it at the county level. So there's those kind of, idiosyncrasies.
Well, and that goes to the in-between spot where with staff, you're the boss, right? But with the commission, you're subordinate to their policy wills. But the idea that the commission's role is to set policy, approve policy, and make sure you're staying on that policy agenda, the strategic plan. But your job is to implement and to oversee and guide, and you're responsible if something breaks.
And then to try to help train those commissioners, because those faces change. And you may get one that's been involved, that's engaged, that understands, and you can get those that all of a sudden there was just some, hot issue out there, got them elected for some reason, and now they have no clue what to do. You always hope that you can convince them, let me try to help, guide, and steer, but it's still your decision. You're the one that has to make the ultimate recommendation and vote here. I'm just the implementer of your policies and procedure.
Yeah, that is an interesting change. I'd say in the last half a dozen years, more people are coming from specific activism areas as opposed to, I served on the planning commission, I worked on this, the zoning commission, I was commissioner here or there, and they come with a little more knowledge. I think you're seeing a somewhat of a shift, people coming thinking what their role of a commission is one thing, when it's really not. Many city charters say the commission's not allowed to call staff. They can call the city attorney, the city manager, and the clerk, and that's it. You can't pick up the phone and say, hey, I got a pothole, I need you, Joe, to go out there and fix a pothole in front of my neighbor's street. You can't have that. It's got to go through.
I mean, one of the reasons I ended up at the city of Wauchula is because of that kind of a disconnect in local government where commissioners were giving direct orders to employees. And it just ended up being a mess and got people removed from office and all. So you have to be very careful and understand the basics of local government. Period. Whether you're a charter city, county, charter or not, it doesn't.
I remember I was working for a member of Congress, and a lady came in about she wanted her street repaved, and we said, ma'am, you have to go to your mayor, and she's of course gave the correct answer, which is I didn't want to start that high, So yeah, your job is to be the implementer. Their job is to be the policy setters. How do you manage that with them? Because a lot of folks get elected because they want to accomplish things, but when they ultimately learn your job is just to set policy, you don't decide where that street's going to go except through policy. How do you manage some of that?
That can be difficult, but it's all about building those relationships, understanding the team. For me, everybody understanding what their role is. My 5 commissioners now, I believe, clearly understand that they are the team owner, and they set up in the big box and tell us what they want to get done. But we've been working with each one of them because they're one of them. They've got some great commissioners, but they're still there's some of them right now in the County Commissioner Certification Program that the Florida Association of Counties sponsors through the University of Florida. All we can do is help encourage them to get as much knowledge and understanding as they can of how the process works for them.
And then when they understand the process, that works good, yes. And then they leave.
You get them trained, and it's
one of the scary things on that you run that single issue. You met people that run on that single issue and have never been in a city commission.
That's what I mean. Yeah, they don't know.
So they don't even understand not just the role, but even the process of how a meeting evolves and functions. And so you're teaching someone to run before they even realize they have legs.
Is this where we plug the Florida League of Cities Institute of Elected Municipal Leaders? Emo.
And that's the nice thing about when people come from a planning commission or some other body.
Oh my gosh.
They at least have some understanding of
Robert's Rules of Orders. Yeah, you know.
I was an elected official before I took the city manager's job. I was a county commissioner, and I had been in that role for 3 years and just been chair 2 of those, and was just starting to understand what my job was that I had been fighting with the previous county manager at that time, who I now have a great new appreciation for 12 years later on the other side of that day. So it's no easy job, whether it's the elected official or the CEO, whether you're a city or county manager. There's nothing easy about it. There's nothing any more rewarding about it. I mean, I just came into this opportunity 12 years ago. I've been a local government. I wish I'd have done it 32 years ago, because it is rewarding. It is hard, it is vicious, but it is so rewarding to see the positive impact you can provide to your community.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, as you've heard me say this on the podcast repeatedly, the FCCMA podcast repeatedly, the heart and soul of a city manager is good public service. Yes. Diversity. You love the diversity of the job. You love being a cocktail party expert, but you don't want to get the credit for anything. Let the ribbons get cut by somebody else. Let the shovels be put in the ground by somebody else, because you get to do good things. When you drive by a roundabout that no longer floods, or a city council new meeting office space or new arts and crafts facility, it gives you a great sense of pride, but it's named after the mayor, right? So that's part of the heart. Tell in the meeting, what is your role in the meeting?
So it's really interesting. I think either your chair or your mayor is really key. If they're a good mayor or chair, they can direct those people when they're starting to say, Ms. Shanahan, we want those speed bumps back. And the mayor will say, please talk to me, you know, so he will redirect that. The crazy thing is, in our charter, it gives the city manager, it's written right out, has the ability to actively participate in the discussion of items. And I think
that's got to be difficult.
Well, I don't usually.
But you're allowed to if you want to.
But it was interesting, because it must have come about years ago when they wouldn't let the manager talk at all. So I think there was a charter amendment, and that was added in there. So that's kind of an odd piece of history in Ormond Beach, that is directly the city manager and the city attorney can actively participate in the discussion.
But you choose the T. Michael's approach, which
generally, you know, I think we are, you know, we've done our work before the meeting, is to set everything up to where you think it's supposed to go. And if they stumble a little bit, then help them out, you know, and that's what I do.
Participation is minimal unless you're asked. I mean, actually, you always want to respond, but it's more about listening in those meetings than it is about actually participating. To Joyce's point, you've done so much work to get it set up and teed up and ready to go in for that meeting that things should be okay. Then you just got to wait and see what your 5 bosses want.
So I want to explore your philosophies about something, because I know there's several different styles in the meeting. So if the commission is mad, and I'll just say that the Parks and Rec director, you have a difficult role there, because if you put the Parks and Rec director up and the commission starts yelling at the Park and Rec, why didn't you do this? This is the thing. Do you get in front of that and take those bullets?
Absolutely. I'd never let that happen. I would never let that happen.
How do you prevent
one of my team members like that to the podium is to give input, not to be receiving any. That's me. That I'm ultimately responsible. Turn your
I know one county administrator would literally have the people stand physically behind him and let's say, please direct the questions to me and I'll work on that.
Well,
but you
if
jumped
I
on
know
that.
there's something that they're going to get picky about, I'll tell that staff member not to come.
Oh.
Yeah.
As a way to insulate them.
Right, because they don't need that. That's what I'm there for, to take those bullets.
Well, and what I love about that, the beauty of that is you are the leader of that staff. And if they know you've got their backs and you're not going to publicly humiliate them or publicly get them, excoriated by the commission, then they're going to be more loyal to you and therefore the city and probably end up doing a better job.
A good example, and I use this speed hump issue, we have a traffic calming program in our community. And so you have to vote. There's a public meeting. There's a community input. There's you get to vote. So every step of the way, we screwed up just a little bit. I'm not kidding. We didn't count the votes right. We didn't mail them to everybody. We put them in before everybody was ready for it. It was just a total poo show. So
We might have to this is G-rated,
Okay,
we may have to X that out.
well, it was a total bad show. Anyway, so I knew that people were coming to the meeting because they were fussing about how it had been handled, because it was a 60-40 or 55-50.
Of all the things you do in a city,
Yeah, oh
right?
my God.
Trash and speed bumps are like,
It took so much effort, but this lady came up and I called her first. I met with her. I told her I had a plan. Somebody was writing on Facebook saying that we never approved these, and it was just a total mess. But I didn't let the director come up about that, because he wouldn't have survived that, I mean, from a sense of
Sure.
his self-esteem wouldn't have survived that. So I had a plan. We were going to, we met with the residents. We were taking them out. We were leaving one because there was a handicapped child there, and the people agreed to that. And then we were taking the other one out. So we did that. It took about 3 months to get it all cleared up, but it was a big, fat mess. But we just weren't paying attention to detail. And I think sometimes that's what gets us in trouble, is when we're really not paying attention to detail.
and you give the opposition a wedge in to come and complain.
And I think one of the things that we have to say is, hey, I'm sorry we screwed it up. That's a fair thing to say. We didn't mean to, but I'm sorry, we screwed it up, and now we got to fix it. And so as a result, we're going to redo our whole traffic calming manual and update it, get some new standards, and not important here, but we would put them in at no cost. Now I'm hearing from other communities that the residents have to have some skin in the game, because that helps get the buy-in.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but it was a big screw up, but saying you're sorry, having a meaningful conversation with the people that are upset, and then taking action like you said you were going to do.
Well, like in the meeting itself, you're taking the bullets for your
Absolutely.
staff, and you're admitting if we did wrong, and then you go from there.
You have to practice what you preach. My philosophy. I have this big red button that I hang on my ID lanyard every day, because if I want my team to perform, they need to know I have their back. And on that big red button, it says the way we always done it, big X to it. And across the top, it says, don't be afraid to fail, be afraid not to try. And we remind our commission on a regular basis when we're talking there's a lot of new opportunity. Look, we're going to try some things here, and it may not work out. So just be prepared, because everything is not perfect. Everything is not the right solution. If you're afraid to try, then you're going to fail all the time.
I want to touch on something that they both mentioned, and it goes back, you were talking about the team. So those situations like the traffic issue, this is a team. So there's your elected body and the manager are in you're not just coming together once a month for your meeting or twice a month in our case. There's dialogue that's happening throughout. So you're keeping that commission abreast. This goes back to the first point.
Yeah.
What are you doing to prepare? So you're keeping them abreast of things that are happening.
Yes.
So in this case, you pre-brief them and say, look, so we're going to have some angry residents of XYZ
We're working
neighborhood.
on this issue, and this is going to be coming to the commission next month or whenever it is. So they've got some idea that that's happening. And in routine conversations, I'm not just talking to them twice a month. I'm talking to them every day in
Right.
some cases. And so you're keeping them abreast of what's happening. And then you get to that meeting where that issue comes up. I'm
They're not
I'm
surprised.
scanning the room. I'm looking at who's the audience for every single meeting.
Amen.
If I see Citizen A who is just furious with us because of a trash collection issue or because of a road that's torn up for construction, I'll go to the mayor and say, hey, just so you know, this person's in the audience this afternoon or this evening, and they may choose to address you. Here's where that issue stands. So that they've got, so it's that pre-work going into the commission meeting, and then during the commission meeting, you're also trying to help.
You got to know who's who in the zoo. And
You know, it's funny because that's exactly where I was going to go. What role does a city manager play when you know you have angry citizens that are about to get up there? Because we talked about you taking the bullet from the commission on behalf of your staff, but what about the bullets that fly from citizens?
So, I have to jump in right there.
Sure.
What we do is we assign 2 greeters to every meeting, and they're department heads, and you have to have a speaker card, so we hand that out, and we encourage them to have a dialogue with the people that are there, so that they can give me a heads up, like, oh, Mr. Smith is here, and this is the 3rd time we've missed his garbage. And just like Michael said, I'll whisper to the mayor and say, hey, just so you know. And then all of a sudden, your commission or your council becomes your greatest champion, because they know, they'll say, oh, we're real sorry that happened, but get with Ms. Shanahan and she can help you. Joyce, will you hand them your card? And I just do that. So, but the greeters really
You
help
have your
us.
card with T. Michael's number on it. Text me anytime, day or night. Yeah.
But,
You have to know your audience.
well, but having people that know who's who is important, so that's why I have my department heads serve as greeters. We just pick two every meeting.
But what
They could be upset for any little thing. I mean,
Absolutely.
After I was at the county, there was one come before our board. The only reason I knew why he was there because of all of the
Sure.
complaining he had done prior to. He just didn't like that they hired me at the county. Now, I'm not going to say he'd have been a former employee of mine at the city, but he just didn't like the fact that I went to the county. But to his right, he has the opportunity to get stand up and give his 3 minutes.
So what I'm hearing is part of that battle is preparing the commissioners, letting them know what's about to happen, no surprise rule is in effect, and then doing things to defuse the situation. And it's interesting about that because we talk about techniques from the DS to defuse, but what you're saying is get ahead of that.
Yep.
Greet the person at the door,
As soon
talk
as they
to
get in the
them.
door.
Play offense.
And if you know
like
what
that.
their issue is, then the public works director goes over, or the parks and recreation, if they're not the greeter that night, they'll link up with other staff. I require my department directors to be there. Some managers,
Unless they're going to get shot at.
well,
Figuratively speaking.
they all sit in one spot, so I can make eye contact or text and thing.
There's enough crazy things that come about.
They need to be
Commission
there.
meeting that even with all that you have to do that preparation. Otherwise, you won't last the meeting because you can have 20 people that come in and they all sign up to speak and you know the issues that they're going to speak on, but there's that one person under comments from the audience that gets up and throws the most wild thing out there that, and you know what's on the agenda and you're thinking, okay, this is probably going to draw some comment in this one, or this is controversial, and then someone throws something out that you haven't discussed in months, maybe in the past year. We had a swearing in for a new commissioner in December, and we had some other issues that were on the agenda that probably would garner some questions from the audience. And I had a gentleman get up, and he wanted to talk about smart garbage cans, big belly garbage cans. And it came out of nowhere, and the commission's looking at me like,
Why didn't you prep us for
what's
this?
he talking about? And I'm like, I have no idea what this issue even is, and we were all on the same page with that.
Right.
Well, thank you for your comments. We'll take that under advisement and look into it. But it was like, if you're having to field those types of things on top of not being prepared for the other things, you're going to get tripped.
So good point. So it's like any good plan. We have a plan. We know.
Custard had a plan.
Yeah. Or what's the Mike Tyson? You're quoting. Everybody has a plan until somebody gets punched in the nose.
Everybody gets
But having that doesn't diminish the need to have a plan because then you know what you're varying from, which goes to your global thing about having a strategic plan. We're going to vary. We're going to be inexact, but having a guide star, as it were, helps you get
Well,
through
it
those
helps
moments.
eliminate those extraneous things a lot of times.
Eliminate them, yeah.
These sort of things. Well, it's like shopping. Oh, I want that, and that. But no, we got our plan right here. Let's
Those
focus
cookies,
on
those cookies look good. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Having a good, strong mayor and or chair, understanding their role and their authority too, because sometimes you can just, like I said, stuff come out of left field. They have no clue what are you, that they don't have to respond. That depending on what your
Thank you for your comment.
You get exactly and move on. You don't have to start. going down
That's a
trying to
hard
get off
one.
these
That's a hard
rabbit
one, and it
holes.
usually
is.
takes
It is.
2 years for a commissioner to realize, because you get that same person who stands up at every meeting and has got 37 things they want to complain about, and say, "Well, thank you so much for your comment," and don't try to solve every problem with everybody all the time.
And then that's where the mayor or your chair come in handy.
If
Because
they're
they-
hopefully they're experienced and can handle that. Let me shift gears, and Terry, I'll start with you on this. Meeting's over. We had a great meeting. You go home, you get a glass of wine, you put up your feet, you watch Netflix or whatever. But
I'll
what
be
is
back in an hour to start the next day.
Exactly, because the meeting ended at 7 a.m. You got to be back in the office at 8 a.m. What is the work that goes into after the meeting? How does that work? It's kind of like the reverse of the prep, right?
Exactly. It's them starting to unfold what are your action plans. You got to know where we're going to head, what all these are actual action items that we have got to continue moving forward for accomplish this, contracts, purchases, land use offers, whatever they are. So that typically prompts us with an executive team meeting. Okay, it's your responsibility to get these items done. It's her responsibility to get the. We know who is accountable, and now we have to start setting deadlines.
So the commission says we want to increase recycling. So let's go to twice a week recycling pickup. And so you'll meet with your waste management person and say, hey, let's go ahead and get some bids, get some reviews. How much will this cost? But that follow through after.
But we're a little higher level than that. We review the whole agenda after the meeting the next day.
With your staff?
Yep. And we review all the action items.
So that your waste management person's in the meeting with
Yes.
your transportation
Yeah,
person, in the
your
meeting with your
department
parks
directors are.
person. Okay.
And one little thing that we do to keep everybody entertained during the meetings and be aware is we guess the times of when the commission meeting is going to end. And so we write those down.
So you get a donut if you're within the closest.
It has to come within 5 minutes. You have to come closest and not going over. So and then we recycled a trophy from Leisure Services. So you can put whatever you want on the trophy. And people put things that are appropriate, like what we might be going through at the time. It can't be bad things, but, and so at the end of the year.
You can't put a little G string.
Directors get what do you do that?
No, they're all on the team.
I've got the next 5 minutes. I'm going to draw this discussion.
No. But
I don't think any staff person, I'm going to go on record, no staff person has ever taken action to extend a city commission meeting. Is that fair?
Oh, they're all sitting there utilizing.
But you know what it does for me? It tells me how aware they are of the items that we're going to be discussing. Because someone will say, oh, we'll be out of there at 8:30. And then someone says, oh, no, we're not going to get out of there till 10 o'clock.
We're talking about euthanasia policies for our animals. That's going to last all night. Yeah.
So that's a good thing. First, it tells me they're paying attention. And then secondly, it might be their item and they have more intel that I need to follow up on, right, than I've been hearing about. So it might sound like a funny thing, but it really helps me get the
It's a
intel I
management
need.
tool using a little humor, a little fun to ensure people are paying close attention. And also, I think what you're saying there too is if I'm in waste management and this person's in parks, if I shut out the world when they're talking about my other stuff, you're not getting the kind of cross-training necessary because invariably that parks director may become the deputy city manager, may become a city manager, and it helps that person to understand across the board. I love how you're using a little bit of fun, a little bit of humor to kind of bring everybody together. What do you do after the meeting?
So our meeting's full on Monday nights. So every Tuesday morning following the meeting, I bring together. So in my meeting setup, I've got my assistant to the city manager is controlling that slide deck. My communications and public affairs director is really helping manage the comments that are coming in. She's posting out to the YouTube. She's watching any feedback that we're getting on everything. So we're sensitive to what the public sentiment is on things. And so those two, along with my deputy city manager and myself, get together every Tuesday morning. We go through the agenda. And if there was a person that spoke under the comments from the audience, what's the follow-up with them and who's it being assigned to? And we strategize a small team with that and then divide that out to whoever needs to be responsible for it. If it's legal things, we'll have the attorney involved in that discussion as well. It's usually a pretty short, 30, 45-minute discussion.
I guess you have to keep these meetings short, otherwise you never go out to actually do the job.
Right.
But I think your key here is engaging your city attorney. You really have to have a good working relationship with your city attorney because they can help you or sync whatever you want to do. So
Yes.
they have, our guy is particularly sensitive to purchasing contracts, so we make sure he's part of that team as well, so he sees what's going on. He doesn't report to me, but he willingly comes to that meeting. He builds rapport with the staff, and that's really important. But I think that's a very key
So
role.
in that Granicus system, he's a clearing point
Right.
before it ever gets to the deputy city manager, and then ultimately to me. That
Same
the
here.
attorney has reviewed countless things: resolutions, ordinances, purchasing contracts, anything has a contract in it or an ordinance-related item. And I agree, you have to have a really solid relationship with the attorney because he's an integral part of that discussion during the meetings as well. And the commission may look to him for legal guidance on, where are we at on this? How do we need to handle this? How do you guide us? And, this person is asking about a zoning issue and they're against it, and the attorney can be real quick to respond. Okay.
Let me sum up what I've learned here today because I think this is, we do the FCCME podcast. I think we're on episode number 150. But what I've learned today that I did not gather, as a city, as a city manager, you do deal with a diversity, incredible diversity of things, which keeps the job interesting, right? But what I've learned here today is you have these processes to manage and control and guide those things so that it all kind of makes sense. Because for me, it's like a bunch of atoms, in the glass. When you look these things seem to be chaos, and you've come up with these systems, which is before the meeting, you kind of funnel everybody. Organized chaos. Well, that's what you're doing, right? You're organizing chaos into a policy and a strategic plan that moves the city forward or keeps it from going back. And then these things get interrupted with cataclysmic events of flooding, a broken water main.
Hurricanes.
Yeah, what's that?
Hurricanes.
Yeah, we have hurricanes in Florida? I didn't know. So, well, let's go to a more or less formal aspect of the conversation, because I think just kind of the fun thing. In the community, you talked about you shop at 7 o'clock in the morning just to get a little alone time, a little peace. What is the role of the city manager in the community at large?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, always be nice, always be polite, speak to people, don't cut in anybody's line. I mean, act like a halfway decent human being.
So do the stuff that your mom taught you before you went to
Absolutely.
kindergarten.
Well, that's paramount. I think you have to do that. But what I tell my key staff is they have to volunteer in the community. I volunteer in the community because I want them to see me as more than just the city manager. So I am on Rotary, I'm on this board or that board, I participate in the chamber, I have my own personal interests, but I volunteer as Joyce Shanahan, not as the city manager. But it gives them a perspective. And I'll tell you a very quick story. When I was in the Panhandle, they wanted to fire me. And I didn't say anything to anybody because I was embarrassed. It was nothing I did. I just had a crazy question. And I never asked one person to come to that meeting. The meeting room was filled with people that supported me that I never asked to be there because they knew me from the community. They knew me from my volunteer work. They knew me from working out at the gym. So I think it builds a lot of credibility for you as a city manager to be actively engaged in your community. And it gives me great satisfaction because I get to do things that are fulfilling to me personally, not just my work, but it fills that other half of my being.
Well, and what's interesting about that is we looked at you're the boss of all the staff. You're the subordinate to the commission. They tell you. But when you're engaged and involved in the community, that gives you a third pod of information, because if you're on the Rotary, if you're on the chamber, you hear what other people's concerns about the city are while you're playing in the background, right?
Or they stop you on the treadmill to ask you about why they can't park someplace.
Yeah, exactly. But you're getting that feedback. Right. So it's not just you giving to the community and doing good things. You're also learning from the community in those different roles. You get outside of your ivory tower, as it was, because I know those are ivory towers that city managers are working in. If they're not leaking and the roof doesn't have mold coming in the side. Yeah. How about you, Terry?
A lot along the same lines with Joyce. In our public engagement process, our new philosophy at Hardy County is using the 3 Ps, and that's always being polite, prompt, and professional, because the general public always usually views it as me and them. They're untouchable.
Me versus them, yeah.
So, and they're untouchable. I can't get to them. I don't understand them. So there's an expectation not only of myself, but of all my executive team to be engaged in the community. Mm-hmm. We may be there as Hardy County employees, as team members of Team Hardy, but we're there as Terry Atchley or Charlotte Gaines or who the other ones are. So you and I can start building a personal type relationship so they understand who you are. They know what you're about. They understand your heart and what your passion is. Are you really the right person to help me move my community?
I love that, because you're serving as a bridge, right? Because you're right. A lot of times we put government out there. Yes. We see government as an adversarial. But when you know the county administrator, when you know the city manager, and you know they care, and they have the same concerns you do. I don't like speed bumps either. Okay, but that's what the community wanted over there.
I'd love to know that I've got the county or city manager's phone number in my phone, and I can call Joyce, or I can get the T. Michael, or Terry will answer me at 9 o'clock at night. Probably shouldn't, but we do.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. What role do you play in the community?
I think that you're the pulse. You got to have a sense of what's going on. Have your finger on that pulse of the community, not only from trying to understand the issues that the community is feeling and what you're going to develop policies around. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, here's all the regulation, everything we've got to work through, but it also gets you down to the human level to see on the implementation side of that, how does this need to look? How's this going to impact Steve as the resident?
Yeah.
And by having that dialogue and being engaged with people, you get a sense of that. The other thing I mentioned to you, I think during the podcast, was that when you meet people where they are, you get a better sense of who they are.
Yeah, bumping them into Publix or Winn-Dixie is better, or at the park or at the gym, you get a better sense.
The first time I get to know you is when you've shown up at the commission meeting to complain about something. I'm late. I'm late to the game.
Yeah.
I should be aware of those things ahead of time and be able to help my commission.
And to fight.
So I spend, a tremendous amount of time, I mentioned to you, in a variety of different churches, because that to me is one of the best places to meet people when their guard's down a little bit and they're a little more open with you. Community events, going to anything and everything that you can to get to know the people that you're serving. It positions you to make better decisions because you know your commission, you know the policymaker, you also now know the customer better. And when you can align the priorities of both, and you can help guide the commission to say, okay, I understand that's what you want to do. Here's the issue that we're going to have within the community about that. Here's what I think we should do to mitigate it.
I'm very enlightened by what it takes to be a city manager, but it sounds also like it's fully immersive. It's that old expression, it's not a job, it's a career. But for you guys, it sounds more like a lifestyle choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And real quick close, what advice would you give to somebody who would like to be in city or county government?
I think you need to research city and county government and talk to managers if you're really interested in that. If you're a department head, try to get some time with your city manager, let them know what your desires are. And, we're always looking for people willing to help us do whatever we can.
Yeah, because nobody goes into it because they're going to become millionaires.
No.
They go into it because they really care in
You
their
have
heart.
to have a service heart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tim. But I think you have to have a service heart.
Terry?
Serve a heart for sure. But to Joyce's point, there's so many resources out there, just like FCCMA, for example, the podcast and all that your team and all that done, this new video series that's coming on board. There's so many ways to just look at, pay attention, and listen to. But again, your foot in the water to test it. Is this something I really want to do? Internships or part-time volunteer opportunities. There's so many ways to get engaged in it to be able to help your own community to know if you really have the passion for local.
Because it sounds to me like you have to have that passion, and it has to be sustainable. And that line, which I do not like, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. No, you'll still work. Okay, it's still going to be hard, but it makes it nicer and more likable if you can achieve something. What are your thoughts on that?
The servant leadership is key, and there was kind of a theme to something that was discussed earlier that we're more the king makers than the king. It's not my name that's going to go on the name of that part.
Right.
It's going to be an elected official, but you get to see how that part comes to be or that building comes to be, and there's.
And it doesn't make it to your desk unless something broke.
Right. If somebody's calling you, it's not to say, Steve, man,
Great job. Love those speed humps in my neighborhood.
You have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with dealing with conflict, with not accepting all the blame for that conflict and being able to separate that.
It takes a while to internalize that.
It does. And I think thick skin, you learn to grow thick skin pretty quick. Otherwise, you won't survive because you're never going to please everybody all the time. That's the ultimate path to failure, is trying to do that. It's trying to mitigate those problems and those pushbacks and make the best decision, knowing, hey, I'm not going to make you happy, but this is the decision.
Best I can do. Best I can do.
And so I think just that mindset, servant heart, it's not about me, but I want to have some role in this process and make a difference for a community.
Well, I know you each are extraordinarily busy. You've taken the time to do this, which I really appreciate, and I know the members also really appreciate it. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found this as interesting and useful and informative as I have. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.